Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar by PRGX, Working Capital, 3 strategies to free up cash and manage suppliers. Thanks for taking about 30 minutes out of your day today to join us. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Firstly, just to let us know through the question box if you're having any issues seeing the slides or hearing the audio. Secondly, you can also ask questions through the question box throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer these at the end. And the third thing is follow PRGX on Twitter and LinkedIn to get more alerts on upcoming webinars. We actually have 3 webinars in an e-summit series in 2 weeks' time on best practices around managing contracts and suppliers. So I'm excited today to introduce our presenter. Jin Rowe is the VP of Advanced Analytics here at PRGX. Jin joined PRGX to help grow the advanced analytics practice in 2019. His role focuses on generating actionable insights for customers that aid in incisive decision-making, utilizing the latest techniques in the field of data science and BI. Prior to joining PRGX, Jin's built award-winning source-to-pay and analytics platforms at Accenture, McKesson, and Seal Software. Jin, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. So unfortunately, I don't have the cool Aussie accent like Tim here, so you're going to have to stick with the American accent. So as Tim mentioned, my background has really been kind of straddling the areas around procurement, finance, technology, analytics, data. And so we currently own the overall analytics strategy here at PRGX, traditionally a recovery audit company, but really the goal here is to use our expertise and investment in data sciences in our technology infrastructure and really push that forward in terms of how can we better serve our customers, where can you benefit. And so the concept of DPO, payment term, working capital, is one that we're leading off with. It's something that a lot of people can benefit from. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep it pretty simple today. We're going to run you through several scenarios that I think you'll be able to relate to some of these things and be able to see kind of how can we gain benefit and value from our working capital program, if we have one, where are some of the things that we should be asking or thinking about or paying attention to as we do this. And if not, it's a great chance for you to go ask these questions, and hopefully it'll drive some interest in some of the things that you want to go do. So we'll look at some of the scenarios. We'll look at how we calculate these things. We'll look at what some of the interesting questions that arise from that. So yeah, it won't take an entire hour. Most likely we're targeting about 25 minutes. Feel free to ask questions along the way, and I'll try to hit them up at the end. So let's get right into it. All right, so scenario number 1, and I think this is the one that most people are interested in. It's the idea that you may be paying your vendors too early, right? So let's start up with this story. Let's say your old college buddy comes up to you, and basically he likes you. You guys had a great time in college, and he has great affinity for you, and he's a successful, generous guy. So he's going to offer you a $500 million loan. The catch, if you want to call it that, is that it's only for 17 days. But the good thing is it's going to be completely interest-free. All right. So the question then really is, what would you do with that money? What could you do with that money? If you're running a business, certainly it's a cash flow that you could take advantage of. It's quite a bit of money, but you only have it for a short period of time. But the question is, what can you do with that? And this is some of the questions that, we can kind of equate to when we actually are not essentially paying our vendors on time, when you're paying them too early. The idea here is that it's really akin to, so in this situation, I'm putting up a couple of numbers here. Your $500 million of payment to your set of vendors, your measured days to pay, and we're going to talk a lot about this, your measured days to pay, you're actually taking about 48 days to pay, but in reality, your contracted term, what you should be paying them at really is around 65 days. So which means that you're paying about 17 days too early here. So that's what it equates to. When you pay your vendors too early, it's literally giving them an interest-free loan for the duration of that period. And in this case, it's quite a bit of money. And you can imagine when we're talking about billions of dollars, as many of you are dealing with, it really starts to add up to incredibly large sums of financial benefits and working cash flow that you could be taking advantage of. So let me actually go over one more screen. This is a sort of a typical, actually in our scale, some of the smallish side of spend that we can see. And again, I put up a couple of vendors that are familiar to everybody. These are not real data, for example, but just to give you an illustrative example of kind of how we're measuring and what we're looking at in terms of these data. So we're measuring the collection of vendors overall at 13.33 days, and you can see how it's made up by the different payment measurement by each of the vendors in the blue bars. And the should be payment term, that is basically what are you contracted, whether by your contract, your vendor master, your invoice term. There's many combinations of those, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But basically, the goal here is to kind of calculate the gap between what are you actually paying your vendors versus what you should be, and how much. If you know that, you can actually start to calculate and quantify what the working capital benefit you could be gaining from just closing this gap. In this case, because again, we're talking about a huge sum of money here and huge amount of payment, just this gap represents $64 million in additional annualized working capital opportunity that you could be taking advantage of. And when you're talking about that kind of money, again, if you wanted to borrow $65 million, in the market, and I'm using a 7% kind of nominal rate just to calculate, that costs real money to borrow that. So again, instead of borrowing that or going out to grab that money, if you take advantage of it from your existing cash flow and free that up, these are some of the benefits that you can gain from that entire situation. Okay, so again, the goal here is to be able to measure all these things that's going on in your organization and be able to quantify some of the major gaps and opportunities that you could be deriving from that. So you saw this acronym here, SWA, on kind of how we're measuring these payments. The reason we're using spend weighted average, and this is something that you should be paying attention to as you kind of try to measure your own payments, is that you certainly want to follow the money, right? If you're paying $1 million in payment at net 10 and have, other payments that are being made at net 90, but these are $100, and let's say you're making lots and lots of payments at net 90 and all these little payments, it's still, you're going to be skewed much more towards net 10 than net 90. So you definitely want to follow the cash weight when you're measuring these things. But by doing that, you can have this overall number measurement that you can use for multiple purposes, right? You can actually use that number to assign to a vendor, assign to a group, assign to a region. So you can really use that to see, to start how you're measuring each of your different entities in a very simple and useful way. And so let me give you some examples illustratively here. This is an example of a vendor that if you look at their payment counts, they're actually net 45 because 90% of their payments are actually being made on net 45 in terms of the count. But if you actually follow the 10% that's being paid around net 30, it actually highly outweighs all the little payments that are being made on net 45. So in this case, if you look at the payment counts, you could be misleading yourself in terms of what the overall supplier net payment actually is. Instead, if you look at the amount, you can very clearly see that this vendor is highly skewed towards net 30, right? And so another example here, this is another vendor where we have a lot of different payments going on, but you can see most of the payments are really centered and just gravitating towards net 20. And if you look at the overall number, when it's measured, it's 23.06 days. So yes, it does take into account a wide variety of payments and things like that. But the goal here is to not, the goal here is to really get you to a single number that you can work with. And as you take action on that, you will be able to very clearly see the change in the number, change in the performance, and be able to measure that in a really meaningful way. And again, keep things still communicable and simple, right? And so as I do this, I know some of you are already asking me, okay, what about discounts? What about discounts? You guys are, if I'm paying my vendors early, sometimes it's because we're getting discounts. We do take a lot of those into considerations as well. We do calculate those separately. Certainly, discounts, they have their own terms, and so we do measure that, and we do track the savings from that situation. But for today's purposes, we're going to keep things really simple. We've taken all the discount terms out of the concept that I've been showing you. So really, we're focusing on the net terms for today. Okay. But certainly, it's a topic that we can get into. We can talk about, if there's further interest. So as we look at these situations, and as we look at, why are we paying too early? Some of the things that we often get asked, and some of the things that you should be asking is, I would think my company already manages this pretty well, and that we probably have a program, and that we probably don't have this kind of opportunity. And I'm guessing if you're on this call, you probably know that you do, but we do often talk to people in finance, people in procurement, people dealing with the payments and accounts payable, et cetera, that don't actually realize that they do have this opportunity. They think somebody else is running it, taking care of it, looking at it, managing it. But the truth of it is not many companies actively manage the payment term performance, or to the degree that they could be or should be. And as we all know, if you're not actively measuring something or actively managing something, there will be a gap. Sometimes it'll be smaller than others, but from my personal experience, having run this over and over as one of the key starting points, again, when you're talking about lots and lots of payments, as we do in the recovery audit space, this is one of the things that we can get into very easily. We often see a gap. It just happens. And some of the usual suspects, really, to give you an example, there's often system inconsistencies, right? So, we look at the box on the right, so key systems points to compare. You could have had a net 30 payment term for a specific vendor, you've renegotiated it, and now it's net 60, but that newly contracted term didn't, for example, end up in your vendor management system, so that never got updated, or it never got updated in the accounts payable system, or your vendor is still continuing to send you bad invoice terms. So there are many different ways that you can actually have a mistaken or sometimes just bad payment terms in your system. So systematic inconsistency certainly is one of the first things that we'll notice, and we'll be able to point out where it exists. We should be comparing your actual payments to your invoice terms, to your vendor master terms, to your contract terms. And oftentimes there will be many different variances there and many combinations therein, and you are going to oftentimes see a gap, see an opportunity, see a difference, right? And one last bit on the left-hand side, again, talking about usual suspects and why this often happens is, there's overrides and exceptions that happen constantly. I'm sure many of you have had interactions with your vendors that are asking for certain payments, or can we get this earlier due to the relationship you have, and you may have emails coming in from your the category manager or the person who is working on that program or that contract, asking for an earlier payment for whatever reason, and that does often tend to happen. And it's one of the things that we build into the narrative, build into the scenarios, because a program change, a system fix, and checking for all these discrepancies and all the gaps, these are all part of the solution, part of the equation, right? You need all of these things to happen in order to be able to fix this gap and fix the situation. But first step, as you can imagine, in all of this is certainly to measure it, to find it, to quantify it, and to alert and to bring people's attention to it so that you can actively manage it. All right, so let's move on to scenario number 2. So in this case, we're going the opposite way, where we have a situation where we're paying vendors too late. And yes, this is actually the second largest scenario that we run into. We have actually we've had customers that I've worked with where their main issue was that, look, we know we're paying our vendors too late, and we know there's a problem, and our vendors are extremely unhappy about it. It's something that we'd like to be able to at least look at, see what's happening, how bad, and take action on that. And it's again, it's not something where you can gain any financial benefits from per se. But obviously, one of the things that often happens is one of the highest recorded call email volumes that AP potentially receives is really around unpaid invoices. So those are some of the things that we certainly need to address. Obviously, supplier happiness, whether you care or not, I certainly think we want to, is definitely a part of running a successful business and organization, and you want to make sure that you guys are paying these guys on time. So one of the things that we help do is find and measure your payment performances for each vendor. How late are we paying them, if so, and really trying to manage that, because obviously when you can see it, when you can see how bad we're doing, we can actually take action and close that. And certainly in terms of just quantifiable benefits, there's certainly late payment penalties that we want to be avoiding. And we can actually quantify that if you do have contracts or relationship where you do have these situations, or we can find those late payment increases in the invoices. These are some of the things that we can look at and address as well. And even if you don't, we all know that, vendor relationships, there's, anytime there's you're either being underpaid or shortchanged, people find ways to put that back, right? People find ways to put that back into the price, or, it always tends to kind of balance itself out. So it's definitely something that we want to address, think about, manage, and take care of so that it does not become a problem. So the third scenario then is around our modeling these payment terms. So it's one of the things that we deal with most often once the initial measurement and kind of the fixing and taking care of the opportunities. Once that's done, the third scenario is then what else can I do with that? Now that we, we closed that 20, 30, 40-day gap that we had, and we've kind of realized those efficiencies, what else can we do? How else can we do better? And these are some of the questions that we often get asked. And so we have a couple of different patterns, and there are many, many more, but we're going to, I'll show you two that we can really get into in a deep way that we help our customers with. So now that you've optimized your terms, the first thing that we could look at is modeling payment term changes. And one of the things that we then bring into that equation is, industry or supplier benchmarks, okay? So we're paying these vendors at X. So how do I know if I'm doing well or not? If I'm, within the guideline, within the, benchmark of the industry or my peers, based on my size of spend, based on my region, based on the services that I'm using, is this the right payment term? And actually, one of the great ways of just looking at where you are in that scenario is to just look at, what that vendor payment term is for the industry or for that group, for that profile, and be able to see whether you're doing well or not. Obviously, with that sort of information, one of the things that you might want to also bring in is, if I'm running a payment term change program and trying to put a certain number of vendors from net 45 to net 60 or net 90, whatever the case may be, who of that group is actually coming up for renewal or negotiation, and so then I can feed that information in. So again, from an analytics and data usage perspective, you can see how we kind of start to bring in all sorts of additional data points in order to really continue to grow on this, which, if you work with us, it's something that you'll see often. We want to continue you down the path of that journey of, thinking about and looking at your data in a way that you continue to try to gain value out of it and connect more and more different points. And this is just one example where we can start to help you do that. And the second path is, again, looking at potential discount modeling, right? So let's, again, in the modeling sense, let's say, the goal here is we have a program where we want to push vendors back. That's certainly something that you want to model and measure and see what the benefit could be, should be. But the other way is if you have vendors that are pretty far out and they have a pretty good payment term, net 60, net 90, if we were to start introducing discount programs or discount terms into their contracts, what's the benefit? Which one is better? If we're comparing, net 10, 2% versus net 90, based on our current financial circumstances and the payment amount and cost of cash, which one's better? Which one's more beneficial? Which one should we be going after? I mean, these are some of the things that, we put into our modeling scenarios that we can help you with. And so, I'll give you a, very, very small snapshot of some of the things that will be available. Basically, the idea here is that you should be able to see all your vendors, pick the set that you're really interested in because either you're going into negotiation with them or they fit a certain profile and you want to act on them. We can, number one, tell you where they are today, and you can actually use a bunch of interactive measures to change your payment terms and see what the benefits or value of changing that could be or would be, so that you can take appropriate measures. And based on these information, then you can set actually customized path for different categories, different countries, different regions, different sets of vendors to make sure that you're taking appropriate action. Because I think we've all seen some of the kind of the pitfalls and drawbacks from the hammer approach, right? Okay, we're going to change everybody to net 90 and we're just going to do it. It's a hard thing to do, right? You have supplier fallbacks and pushbacks, and you have some disgruntled things going on, and not everyone can be pushed that far back. And so you really want to be able to do this in a measured, calculated way, making sure that you have the data to support your actions and that you're taking action on the appropriate targets. And so this kind of modeling helps you really create that right path that, it helps everybody, right? Because I think, some of the, things that we've seen in the past is when a customer actually does have that kind of, move everybody to this target kind of program, one of the things that happen is we're asked to then kind of come in and help them, number one, measure how are we doing towards that? And number two, are there some things that we could have done better, could be doing better? So these are kind of some of the ongoing conversations we tend to have. And again, the idea here is to show you that there are really good data-driven, analytics-driven way for you to really set those right targets and be able to measure and help you measure as you go along. All right, so this is my last slide for the day, and then I'll answer some questions. If you haven't already put in any of the questions, feel free to go ahead and I'll address them in just a minute. But really, this is meant to be a small introduction to kind of how we think about what working capital, DPO, payment terms, and also some of the questions that you could be asking. Certainly, we get much, much deeper and more analytical in the sense in getting into this topic, but this was meant to give you some introductory elements for you to think about, some of the questions you could be asking. And so really key summaries here for as takeaways. So number one, as I mentioned, if you're not already actively managing your cash flow in your organization, in your group, you're most likely leaving valuable working capital uncaptured, something that you could be taking advantage of. And even if you have done it in the past, if you haven't done it for a while, something that you might want to take a look at and measure. Number two, you certainly want a partner who can help you quickly and efficiently highlight those gaps and opportunities. That's something that we kind of take pride in, that we can do this really, really quickly, and that we can do this in a really accurate way where we can show you the value of working on specific vendors, specific even sets of payments. We can show you exactly how that was calculated and what those terms look like for those vendors, for those payments, for those invoices. And we can do this at a categorical, regional, business unit, functional level. So those are some of the things that we can really help you focus on. And again, just drawing this all back to my root and my current role as the analytics lead and platform lead. Really, the goal here is to be able to use your data, use what you have, and be able to connect it all and help you gain value and knowledge from what you already have. One of the most valuable assets that you all have as part of this large organization is your data, and we want you to be making sure that you're getting the value out of that. So I'll stop there, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues to let me know if we have any questions that we want to address.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Yeah, a really good narrative there. Like Jen said, if you've got any other questions, feel free to put them in the question box now, and we'll aim to address them. Otherwise, you can email us at marketing@prgx.com, and we'll aim to follow up afterwards as well. Jen, so the first question that come through is, how long does it take to set up something like this, or to set it up and get it running?
Yeah, good question. So we have invested in quite a bit of technology, and especially working with huge sets of data. You know, when you're talking about billions and billions of dollars, and you know, all sorts of different data sources and countries and regions, and you know, different data, you know, systems, right? We're pulling from Oracle and PeopleSoft and all these different areas. So one of the things that we really invested in is being able to capture all the data, process it quickly, get this up and running. So we have a pretty good set of templates set up. The great thing is that we can actually get these things up and running in a matter of weeks, if not earlier. It's not in months, I'll say. So this is something that we can normally help our customers get up and running very, very quickly. And if you are already an RA customer of ours, an audit customer of ours, and where we already have your data, it's something that we can actually get up and running even sooner. So, okay. Yeah.
That's good. Thanks, Jen. Next question. Once you measured the DTO, what happens next?
So, as I kind of showed you earlier, the first thing that we want to do is kind of measure your current performance. You know, what is your target? Again, we'll bring in as many different sources as you have available. Your contract terms, your vendor master terms, your invoice terms, your vendor terms. We want to make sure to compare all of that and then measure that against your actual term. And that's actually the most straightforward in terms of measuring. So let's say we establish your baseline, we establish where you are today, how you're doing. Then the goal is for all of us to use that information to take action, right? Close some of the gaps, find out why we're paying these guys so early, find out why these guys have payments that are so different from their terms, why are, you know, which one's correct. We have 3 different terms for these guys, why, you know, which one's the correct for these payment terms. So we want to make sure to start you off on that journey. But as you do that, as you take action, of course, the thing that we want to measure is, are we getting closer and closer to that set target, especially for the you know, targeted 100 vendors that, you know, we started the journey with, that we really want to focus on. So going back to the question, how often? Really, we want you to we want to help you do it on at least a monthly, if not quarterly basis, just to see the you know, the gap closing. But, you know, there are some situations where, you know, our customers want us to highlight some of the bad payment habits as they happen, right? We made this payment too fast. And if we can catch that and we can kind of constantly alert people on that, then we can actually change those habits a little bit quicker. So there are some situations where we can even bring up alerts more frequently than even on a monthly basis.
And that's great. Yeah, no more questions in today, but if anyone does have any follow-up questions after watching the webinar, either live or on demand, you can reach out to us at marketing@prgx.com. Thanks, Jen. Great insights, and thanks for everyone for joining today. As I said, keep an eye on Twitter and LinkedIn, and also our Bright Talk channel for more upcoming webinars. But thanks for tuning in today. Thanks, Jen.
All right. Thanks all. Bye-bye.